Welcome to this video on the Tableau Certified Data Analyst exam content. Today I'm going to be talking about removing grid lines, row level and column level bands, and shading. And so here's what we're going to cover. We're going to look at removing grid lines, we're going to look at removing row level and column level bands, and then we're going to look at removing shading. And pro tip, if I'm going too quickly or too slowly, adjust the speed of the video as needed. Now, here is the documentation on removing grid lines. Here's the documentation on removing bands and shading. It also explains how to add them. If you know how to do one, you really know how to do the other as well. And so now I'm going to get into it. I've got Tableau open here. I'm going to start on the grid line sheet. And so to remove these grid lines, I go over to Format and then Lines. And so this is the icon that gives me the Format Lines menu. And here we have grid lines. So all we do is we select None, and then we've removed those grid lines. Now we also see that we have, I guess, here some reference lines, I think it is. I'm going to do None there as well. None, None. We can put as many of these as None as we like, right? 0 lines, boom, like this. Got rid of that as well. And so that was just for the rows. Now I'm going to switch over to the columns and put the grid lines here as none also. So now we've removed both the row and the column grid lines. I still have the 0 line, so I can take that out as well if I want. Go over to none like this, and now that's gone. And it looks like I still have the axis ruler here, so I can take that out like this, none. And now really everything is gone. So now I just have the axis markers and that's it, right? Just the data and the axis labels and the axis markers. So not a whole lot left here. So that's it on grid lines. You can see the same thing if you had a different chart type, like this is a line chart here. And so we could just go over here and remove these grid lines here, as well as the 0 line. Same thing, just a different chart type. So that's not too much to say about removing the grid lines. That's kind of it. Now over here on the shading menu here is, I think it's over there, right? I click on this paint, and now if I want to remove the shading, there's this row banding option. So the rows are on the bands. Sorry, the shading is on the bands. So basically every other row is shaded. That's the row banding. You can kind of see more if I put a larger category here. So if I do, instead of segment, if I do like subcategory, you'll see a lot more bands here like this. If we do it like this, you see that there are a whole lot of bands back and forth. And so if I go over to Format, Shading, and I go row banding, none on the pane, and also none on the header, then the row banding is gone. If I select columns, I can also add or subtract row banding. So here, now I put the banding on the the columns, and then I can take it off again with none, like that. And so that's how you adjust the shading on the bands so that you have alternating bands of color so that you can kind of clearly distinguish different columns or different rows, but you can take that off if you don't want. And so the other option is to do other types of shading, right? So for example, I can shade the totals, just want to show that. If I go over to grand total here, I can shade like this. Oops, except I need to do it on the rows because I'm not showing the column. So here, yeah, I am now putting shading on the grand total. And I can do, also shading in other areas, right? So if I just want to do the whole worksheet, I could do the whole thing like this. But that's another shading option, then we can remove that as well. So that's kind of it for the combination of grid lines and shading, either row banding or just shading other areas of your table. That's all I have on removing grid lines and shading and row banding. So now I want to close it off with a quote from Edward Tufte. He says, "Graphical excellence is that which gives to the viewer the greatest number of ideas in the shortest time with the least ink in the smallest space." And so that particular last thing he says, the least ink, that would be an example where removing grid lines can potentially be favorable, at least from Tufte's perspective, because by removing those grid lines, you make your visualization less busy. It has less color on it. It's sort of more minimal style. And that's what he was pushing for, is that these sort of more minimal style of visualizations where every bit of color, every bit of ink on the screen, what he would call ink, really it's pixels on the screen, is the least amount that you need to convey the most amount of information. Thank you.